Berkeley, what, last week?
About a month or so ago, yes.
And how did that go? That kind of addresses going to where we believe we would not be welcome.
Right. Berkeley's not an easy crowd. Not known for being very conservative. And so I took the message, basically the Fourth Amendment. But here's the interesting thing. The speech I gave was almost identical to a speech I gave 2 weeks before at the Conservative Political Action Committee. So it's not like I just said, oh, I'm going to say one thing here and one thing there. But I brought the message to a bunch of young people about privacy and their cell phone and the whole idea of due process and that these are our rights. The other thing I frankly often say, not only at Berkeley, but we'll say, at the Urban League, is that the Bill of Rights isn't so much for people who are popular. The Bill of Rights is for people who are minorities, but also people who are unpopular ideas, people who might be homeschoolers, people might be evangelical Christians that aren't the majority necessarily, but have ideas that they believe strongly in. So I think, and I tell people, look, you can be a minority because of the color of your skin or the shade of your ideology. But it resonated at Berkeley the same way it resonated at CPAC. That is ultimately the answer, is not giving up on what we believe in, but finding aspects of what we believe in and trying to say, come and join our party because this is why we will defend your rights. We have always been the party, really, of the Bill of Rights, voting rights and civil rights, but it got lost somewhere. We need to talk more about it. There was a bill passed in 2011 that allows for an American citizen to be indefinitely detained. And I was horrified by this. The president signed it, and he said, oh, I'm a good man, I'll never use it. That's not what laws are about. It's about Madison said, it's not, if everybody in government were angels, we wouldn't have to worry about the law. And I'm not even so much saying President Obama's a bad person. I'm saying, what if the next guy is even worse, and the next woman? That's why we have laws. The laws are to restrain the government. But that passed. But when you think about it, if you're any kind of minority, you need to be more worried. If your ideas are at all not whatever everybody else thinks, and you want to have your own ideas, and you're worried about that nonconformity being a problem. So one of the other senators said, well, it's no big deal. We're only going to lock up people who are dangerous. I said, sort of begs the question. Who gets to determine who's dangerous, who's not? That's what a trial's about. That's why you get a lawyer. That's why you get due process. And it's the very definition of tyrannical government is arbitrariness. And you can't allow things to be arbitrary. One of the examples I'll often use is, everybody remember Richard Jewell? Richard Jewell was said to be the Olympic bomber. He was convicted on TV within hours. He fit the profile. He had a backpack on. He was kind of an introvert. And he tried to help, and sometimes I think bombers try to help afterwards. Turns out he wasn't the bomber. They did finally catch the bomber, but they convicted him within 4 hours. And I tell people, think about it, if he'd have been a black man in 1920 in the South, when we weren't doing a very good job with due process, what would have happened to him? Vigilante justice. And so we need to be the party, we always have been the party of the rule of law, and we talk about it all the time, but let's be the party of the rule of law on everything. The war on drugs is another example. 3 out of 4 people in prison are black or brown. You say, well, they're using drugs a lot. So are white kids. What's happening is poorer kids in the big cities are easier to find and arrest. They don't get as good of attorneys. I also don't think we should lock people up for 15 and 20 years. Do I think drugs are bad? Absolutely. And so I really think any kind of use of illegal drugs is wrong. But at the same time, if kids make a mistake, I don't want to put them in jail for 10 years, 15 years. And you say, gosh, that's a liberal idea. I remember in an interview 10 years ago, had Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, and Cal Thomas. Not your most liberal people. And they asked each one of them, if someone in your church were caught with drugs, what would you rather, incarceration or counseling? Every one of these Christian conservatives said counseling. Still, some people are going to have to be punished more severely, but for goodness sakes, let's try to get people back into employment, get them away from drugs. Let's try to get them back the right to vote. So there are things that we can. I know that's been an issue in Iowa, it's an issue in Kentucky. But I have a friend who 30 years ago, it's a friend's friend actually, 30 years ago had marijuana plants in a college dorm room, got a felony conviction, still can't vote. He's married, he's got kids, it's 30 years later. I mean, most of us are Christians, we believe in redemption. Certainly don't we believe in, that the law should give you a second chance. Now, I'm not talking about violent people. Violent people need to be separated from us. That's why we put them in prison. But nonviolent people, I think, deserve a second chance. We want to give them a chance to get back employed. Anybody else? Yes.
Yes, Senator, thank you for coming here. I've got 5 grandchildren. I'm very concerned about the national debt we're passing on to them. A few years ago, the president commissioned the Simpson-Bowles thing, and as near as I can tell, that's gathering dust somewhere on a shelf. Whatever became of that?
Completely ignored, like the Grace Commission from 20 years before. One of the big things from the Bowles-Simpson was that to fix Social Security and fix Medicare, we need to gradually raise the age. It's really not as hard as you would think. It doesn't affect retired people. Retired people are already retired and they're already on Social Security Medicare. It's my generation. But if you start doing that from my generation and on down, you can fix, that's 2/3 of the Social Security problem you fix if you raise the age to 70. You don't do it for people who are 69 and can't make plans. You do it for people who are 50 and 55 and on down. That fixes 2/3 of the problem. But here's the thing is, the president says, I'll talk to you about entitlements if you'll raise taxes another $1 trillion. And it's like, oh, you want us to sabotage the economy, ruin the economy, raise unemployment so you'll do what's right and what you just should do because it's broken. And here's the problem. You need politicians or legislators or people who run for office who are brave enough to say that. We should raise the age. I said it, frankly, in Kentucky, and they said, you can't be elected if you say you're going to raise the age of Social Security. And I said, well, maybe people are ready for someone who actually do the right thing rather than what's the political thing to do. But here's how difficult it is. We had a vote about 4 months in Congress, and this vote was Twiggy the water skiing squirrel, which is a fascinating video if you want to watch it. But Twiggy the water skiing squirrel, will you pay $3 million for Twiggy the water skiing squirrel to promote the sale of American walnuts in Spain? And God love you, if you've got a walnut farm, good for you, but I'm not interested in selling them for you. The government shouldn't sell your walnuts, you know? So we have a $3 million program. We tried to cut it. We lost. We couldn't cut $3 million from a program that really is not essential to the basic function of government. And when you have a $1 trillion deficit, should be one of the easiest things to cut. Over half the Republicans voted to keep it, and almost all the Democrats did. But how I relate this to Social Security and entitlements is, if you can't cut Twiggy the squirrel, how are you ever going to raise the age on Social Security? But I think it might be going the opposite way. If you ever got someone who ran for office who was honest enough just to say something that might not be immediately popular, that we should raise the age of Social Security and Medicare gradually, a couple of months a year. Reagan did it in 1983. We changed, a lot of people don't even realize this now. If you get ready to retire, you probably do, but we raised it from 65 to 67, about a month or two, and I think it's right about at 67 now, but it took 20, 30 years to get there. You do that again. You do it over 20, 30 years, raise the age to 70, fixes a lot of the problems. And people say, well, that's heartless. We'll say, no, that's the compassionate thing, because I'm trying to save Social Security. You try to save Medicare. But Social Security is $6 trillion in the hole, and Medicare is $35 to $40 trillion in the hole. The thing that lacks compassion is to do nothing. And that's what's going on now. Everybody just, oh, well, you know, we'll see what happens.
The 2016 isn't that far off. The worst thing you can do in politics is let your opposition define you. And I think the Republicans would really be well advised to get out front, have a contract like a contract for America or that type of thing. Because the mainstream media is not going to cut you any favors because they're in the back pocket of the administration. And the other side of my question is, I'm not going to ask you whether you're going to run for 2016, but do you have 50 different ties?
By coincidence, I have a corn tie, and by coincidence, I have one in the shape of South Carolina. I don't know why, but a lot of people harken back to the contract with America. We made it clear, succinct, we made a national message, and it did help. For congressional candidates, it's sometimes hard to get enough money to get your message attached to your name, but we attached it for everybody, and we ran on a very popular sort of 10 planks with the contract with America. It's a great idea. Not only do we need to attach ideas to our name, we need to have sort of a, I tell people it's kind of like Domino's. Domino's a couple years ago said, you know what, our pizza crust is the pits, it's not very good, and they admitted it on a commercial and said, we're going to do better. The Republican Party kind of has to, we kind of need a new GOP. We need, not giving up the best parts of what we are, but we need to put a better face forward. Because frankly, our problem with getting new voters is not the policy. I'm not promoting that we change most. I mean, a lot of our policy, I think, is the correct policy, for poverty, for unemployment. But if people don't think about that you care about them, they're never going to listen to your policy solutions. So we have to go places we haven't been going. We have to show up in Detroit. We now have opened, the RNC has opened an office in Detroit. I was there for the opening. We need offices in all the big cities. We are winning the countryside. We just aren't winning the big cities. So to win big cities, though, people have to listen to you. To listen to your policy, they have to see you showing up at venues you haven't been showing up, and you have to have something to say once you're there. But, and I think Reince Priebus, who is the chairman of the RNC, understands that. I've seen him in a lot of the places saying the same thing I'm saying. We have to have a bigger party.
What is your opinion of the Iowa core education system, and how would you add more local control to it?
The first part of that is, what do I think about the Iowa core? This is part of Common Core. I'm not real excited about Common Core. I think that most things with curriculum should be developed locally. I'm sort of old-fashioned. Ronald Reagan wanted to get rid of the Department of Education. I still would. I'd get rid of it. Because I'm not sure anybody's any smarter since 1980 that our kids are doing better when compared on international testing. I'm not opposed to testing. In fact, when I was a kid, we took a national test. It was the California Achievement Test. But each state sort of looked around and they decided to do it. But now when you mandate it from above, everybody's like in Kentucky, we have our own testing, and we take a national test, and then the government forces us to take another test. The kids are tested to death, I think, and not necessarily any smarter. Is some testing good? Yes. But I would let local people figure that out. I think if you want innovation, you need more freedom for the superintendent, the principal, the assistant principal, the teachers. I also think that we make a mistake as Republicans blaming teachers for everything, because frankly, some of the fault, we need to look in the mirror. It's parents' fault as well. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called Outliers, and they talk about the poverty gap. If you look in kindergarten or first grade and you test kids, poor kids test worse than middle class and rich kids. And it gets worse each year until about fifth grade. It just keeps getting worse over time as kids go to school. But if you look at it in September and May of each year, it gets narrower each year in school. It gets wider in the summer. All of the difference in poverty gap can be accounted from kindergarten to like fifth grade in the summer, not during school. So actually our schools aren't as bad as we think. It's we, the parents, aren't as good as we think. And if we don't understand that, we won't be able to fix the problem. And I think you need more innovation locally. And I don't like the idea of a national curriculum or Common Core, and I'm opposed to that. I was opposed to No Child Left Behind also, which is what Republicans did, which doubled the size of the Department of Education, spent much more money in Washington, had many more mandates on testing, and frankly judged whether a teacher was good or bad from Washington. Nobody in Washington has a clue whether your local teacher here is good or bad. It's a way for us to be actually on the side of teachers. Most teachers hated No Child Left Behind, but it was also federalization of the control. I think if we can be for more local control and tell teachers, frankly, nobody in Washington knows whether you're a good teacher or bad. Let's judge that locally, and it still has to be judged. We need to improve our teachers. There's all kinds of great stuff going on in education. Has anybody ever seen Khan Academy? There's this guy named Salman Khan. He doesn't have a teaching certificate, but he's an engineer from MIT. He has like 2,000 YouTubes that are like a minute or two long, maybe 3 minutes long, on just different scientific things. Like I watched one the other day for one of my kids on the Doppler effect. It's the best explanation I've ever heard. And what you could do in education, if you want to transform education, is you could have extraordinary teachers anywhere in the world who would teach classes. You would still have the local teacher, but why not have the person who's the best person in the entire world to explain calculus, explain it to your kids in your local high school? They do a lecture, and then your teacher would also then help them to try to understand. But there are extraordinary teachers. Let's pay them more. Let's let them teach millions of kids at a time. Let's let our teachers then learn from the extraordinary teachers the techniques. And you could transform education. Then get the kids, give them a choice on where they go to school. Let poor kids get a voucher, let them go anywhere they want. All of a sudden you'd have competition, you'd have much better schools. But I do it all more locally and not at the federal level. Yes?
Senator, when we take control of the Senate, what is the caucus leadership in the House and the Senate? What are the first 4 or 5 things they're going to do next winter, next spring? You've spoken about Social Security. Address highlights in regards to health care, foreign policy, taxes. I mean, how can we hit the ground running and tell the country we're ready for change?
If I had to guess, one of the first things would be repealing Obamacare. However, I have to be a realist with you. If we get 51 votes in the U.S. Senate and we have a majority in the House, the House and the Senate will probably vote to repeal it. If I had to predict, I think he'll veto it. So, I know that's a real shocker to you. However, I think we still will do it to show the people that that's what we're for. That being said, I think we will then try to see what he will sign. I think we'll send him another bill and another bill until we find things that he'll sign. Ultimately, there's going to be even more pent-up frustration with Obamacare when you see your bills. The bills are going to come due this fall, and the premiums, I believe, are going to go up for most people. I think we're also going to find that he gave insurance to a lot of people, subsidized their insurance, but he gave them subsidized insurance with a $6,000 deductible. If you can't buy your insurance, what are the odds you're going to pay your $6,000 deductible? Your local hospitals are going to find that people now think, well, I've got my insurance card, so they're going to go more often, but it's a $6,000 deductible, and I think they're going to find that they're still non-payers. The hospitals originally supported Obamacare thinking we would convert non-payers to payers. I think what's going to happen is we're going to convert non-payers to people who think they're going to pay, who show up, who still don't pay. And I think the hospitals are going to be hurt by this, and there's going to be a crisis. The other thing that's going to happen, and I don't know what you guys did with Medicaid here, but in Kentucky we expanded Medicaid by 50%. We went from 700,000 people to 1 million. Anybody ever had a 50% increase in the cost of their business in 1 year? That's a dramatic increase in cost, and it's going to be difficult for that to be absorbed by the working public. It's sort of what Phil Graham used to say, you keep loading people in the wagon, someone's got to pull the wagon. And you can get too many people in the wagon. There is a danger of that. Yes?
My question is twofold. One, with all the stuff coming towards the internet, there always seems to be another bill attacking internet freedom. Is it time for a constitutional amendment that actually protects that, for one? And twofold, with the college debt situation, nobody seems to be talking about the fact that, quite frankly, banks are giving out loans that are virtually indentured servitude because you can't not pay that back. My sister, for one, went to a very good college, had some help, but she got the federal loans, and then she also had private loans. Well, those are two separate things, so now her loan payment is at a really, really tough point, and thank God she's got people to help her out. But what happens to all the people that don't help it out? Are we allowing banks to create a situation because of the way it's so we have to have school rather than reforming the system? I mean, how do you fix that without addressing the way these people are lending?
As far as internet freedom, one of the great things that has happened to our country in the last 20 years, and really to the world, frankly, has been the hundreds of thousands of jobs created in a brand new industry that no one ever could have conceived of. One of the reasons it did is because it was brand new, it wasn't overburdened with regulations and taxes. So the internet, if we can keep it free of taxes and free of regulations, is still one of the biggest engines of growth. You know, Apple Computer is one of the largest taxpayers in our country and one of the largest employers as well. So yeah, we need to keep the internet free. On student loans and on the cost of education, it's not a simple issue trying to figure out exactly how you fix it. But I would ask you, when you think about it, what in our economy has prices that rise rapidly? Healthcare and education. What is the common denominator between the two? The government's heavily involved with subsidizing the demand for both. That's a good explanation, but then the answer you would have to think is government would have to subsidize them less if you don't want the price to rise so much. You can do top-down control, and you can mandate to universities they can't charge more or that they have to have less overhead. But once again, that's what we've tried in healthcare. You create a problem by subsidizing demand and getting government too involved, and then you bring government in on the top to try to push prices back down. It's just not a good situation. You can help a little bit with student loans, and I have sympathy, but you're right. If the student loans are $150,000 a year, and you thought you were going to make $75,000 a year and you're going to make $30,000, paying it back, it's not a good deal. And some of it is we've also said to everybody that everybody should have a college degree. And frankly, we do need plumbers and pipe fitters and welders and carpenters, and those are good, honorable jobs. And to tell you the truth, sometimes if you're good at them, pay more than a business degree or a general degree from a university. So we need to figure out and not overemphasize, and also maybe emphasize more some technical trades, going to community college, getting technical trades and technical schools. One thing we could do for the burden, and I'm working on a bill on this for the burden of the debt, is to make it deductible. We allow you and your parents to have some deductions and credits versus tuition, but it's over a narrow period of time. I think you have to do it over the window of time you're in college. So if you're in college, you have no income to deduct it against. So let's say you have $100,000 in loans and you get out and you make $30,000 a year. I would let you deduct it maybe for over 10 or 20 years. So deduct $1,000 or $2,000 each year and treat college as a business expense. You're allowed to deduct your business expenses. You went to college to try to get into business or to get a job. Make it deductible over a longer period of time. Make maybe even the principal deductible, not just the interest, but maybe the principal. There are ways we can help it. I don't like what the Democrats want to do. The Democrats want to do is mandate to you, if you're a bank and a student came in and made a loan with you, we're going to mandate what the rate is after the fact. You know, that's sort of, if you destroy contracts, you destroy really the sort of the foundation of our country. That's why third world nations don't succeed, is because contracts won't be honored and your capital's not secure. The government at any point in time can come in and steal your business. And that's why people won't build in the third world, because your contract is not secure. So you have to be a little careful about saying, well, banks charged me 5% 4 years ago, and I'm just not going to pay that. You know, I made a bad decision one time. I bought a house, and when I was in residency, and I paid 11% with premium mortgage insurance. I think I was at 12%. And then interest rates came down. I feel like, why did I do that? Why didn't I live in an apartment for a couple of years? My wife still tells me I made a bad decision on that. Let's do one or two more. Straight back.
Yes, Doctor, as Senator or President, would you sign or be in favor of a marriage amendment identifying marriage between one man and one woman?
I'm in favor of the concept. I am in favor of traditional marriage, and really, you know, I think that's been the foundation of civilization for thousands of years. And the loss of the idea of marriage is really probably the leading cause of poverty in our country, in the sense that if you have kids before you're married, your chance of being in poverty is 3 or 4 times that of anyone else. As far as whether we should do it at the federal level or the state level, I don't want to register my guns in Washington or my marriage. And that may not please everybody, but historically our founding fathers didn't register their marriage in Washington. They registered it locally at the courthouse. I'd rather see it be a local issue, not a federal issue.
You talked about changing the face of the GOP and changing how other people perceive the GOP in particular. I'm a young conservative woman, and I have many friends who typically want nothing to do with Republicans because they have the misconception that you want to keep us pregnant and barefoot in the kitchen. So what are some ways that you want to combat that coming up into the 2016 elections?
You know, some of it's been this sort of narrative that's come from the other side. So we talked earlier about letting the other side characterize you. For the past several years, they've been characterizing us, somehow saying, you know, we're some troglodytes who really are against birth control. You know, there may be various opinions in here, but I think there's probably almost nobody in here who wants to ban birth control. I haven't heard any Republican politician who does. So they made it all about this. The Hobby Lobby case, it isn't about anything to do with government banning birth control. It's really about freedom of religion. It really wasn't even about birth control, because they provide like 15 different types of birth control and objected to a few. But it's really not about that. It's about whether a business should be able to choose what kind of insurance they buy. Because really, frankly, a business ought to be able to decide, you know, it's an expense, it's a cost, what kind of insurance. And that's the whole problem with Obamacare. Obamacare is all this coercion that comes in here and tells you what kind of insurance you can buy. How we change our perception, we need more women to run for office. Step up, we need you next time around. And we do. I mean, your candidate here is Joni Ernst. I was yesterday campaigning for Dr. Miller Meeks as well, who's a good candidate. So you have good women that are running. We need more of that, and we just need to keep telling the media and the Democrats, frankly, that they're being ridiculous about this. They concocted this whole thing in some Madison Avenue advertising agency